I'm 73 years old, and I'm going to tell you something that took me over 5 decades to understand. It's going to sound simple, maybe even obvious, but I promise you, you're probably not living it. And that gap between knowing something and actually living it, that's where most people lose their entire lives. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Blue-collar family. My father worked at a factory for 41 years. My mother kept the house and raised 4 kids. And from the moment I could understand words, I was taught one thing above everything else. Don't be different. Don't stand out. Don't make waves. Fit in. Be normal. Do what's expected. And I listened. God help me, I listened. I became exactly what everyone wanted me to become. I studied what my parents thought was practical. I married when society said I should marry. I took jobs that looked impressive on paper. I built a life that checked every single box. And I was miserable. Quietly, invisibly miserable. But here's the thing about that kind of misery. You don't even recognize it because everyone around you is living the same way. You think this is just what life feels like. You think the emptiness is normal. It wasn't until I was 52 years old that I finally understood what had gone wrong. And by then, I had wasted the best decades of my life being someone I never actually was. Let me tell you the lesson that took me 52 years to learn. It's 5 words, and it changed everything. Other people's opinions don't matter. I know, you've heard this before. Maybe you've even said it yourself, but you don't believe it. Not really, because if you did, you'd be living differently than you are right now. How do I know? Because I said those words for decades while doing the exact opposite. I said I didn't care what people thought while desperately caring what everyone thought. I said I was being myself while performing a version of myself I thought others would approve of. The distance between who I pretended to be and who I actually was. That distance was killing me slowly. Here's what nobody tells you about living for other people's approval. It's exhausting. Not physically exhausting, although that too, but soul deep exhausting. Because you're constantly monitoring, constantly adjusting, constantly asking yourself, what do they expect? What should I say? How should I act? You're never just living. You're always performing. I perform for my parents. I perform for my bosses. I perform for my neighbors. I perform for strangers I would never see again. I even performed for myself, pretending to want things I didn't actually want. And the cruelest part, the performance never ends because when you live for approval, there's always someone else whose approval you need. You're chasing a finish line that keeps moving. When I was 25, I wanted to be a musician. I had taught myself guitar. I wrote songs. Nothing special, probably, but they were mine. They came from somewhere real inside me. My father laughed when I mentioned it. Not cruelly, he thought he was being helpful. That's not a career, he said. That's a hobby. Get serious. So I got serious. I put the guitar in the closet. I got an accounting degree. I spent the next 30 years doing work I had no passion for, work that meant nothing to me, work that paid the bills while slowly draining the color from my life. And you know what haunts me? It's not that I followed my father's advice. It's that I didn't even try. I didn't fight for what I wanted. I just surrendered because I was more afraid of disappointing him than I was of disappointing myself. I chose his approval over my own life. Let me ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Whose life are you living right now? Yours or the life someone else told you to live? Are you in your career because you chose it or because it seemed respectable? Are you living where you live because you love it or because it made sense to others? Are the goals you're chasing actually your goals? Or are they goals you absorbed from your parents, your culture, your social media feed? Most people, if they're honest, are living a borrowed life, a second-hand existence. They're wearing clothes someone else picked out, walking a path someone else mapped, dreaming dreams someone else handed them, and they'll die never having lived their own life, not even once. At 52, I had a breakdown. That's what the doctors called it, a breakdown. But looking back, I think it was actually a breakthrough, just a very painful one. I was sitting in my office surrounded by awards and certifications and all the symbols of success, and I couldn't breathe. Literally could not get air into my lungs. My chest was tight, my hands were shaking, and I thought I was dying. I wasn't dying, but something was, something that had been trying to die for decades. In the hospital, after all the tests came back normal, a doctor asked me a question no one had ever asked before. "Are you happy?" I started crying. Not polite tears, ugly heaving sobs, because I realized I didn't know the answer. I had been so focused on being successful, being respected, being what everyone expected, that I had never once stopped to ask myself if I was happy. The answer, once I found it, was devastating. No, I was not happy. I had not been happy for 30 years. I had been performing happiness while feeling dead inside. That breakdown was the beginning of my real life. In the 21 years since then, I've made changes that shocked everyone who knew me. I left a career that looked perfect on paper. I admitted to my wife, bless her, that I had been pretending in our marriage, and we either needed to get real or get divorced. We chose real. It saved us. I picked up the guitar again. I'm not good, never was, never will be, but playing makes me feel alive in a way that nothing in my successful life ever did. I started saying what I actually thought. I started doing what I actually wanted. I started being who I actually was and discovered that I barely knew that person. Here's what I learned. The people who matter will stay. The people who only love the performance, they'll leave. And you know what? Let them. They were never really loving you anyway. They were loving a mask. My father and I never reconciled before he died. He couldn't understand the changes I made. He thought I had gone crazy. And for a long time, that hurt. But I've come to peace with it. He was living his own borrowed life. He couldn't understand because he never broke free himself. I have more real relationships now at 73 than I had at 40, because now people know who I actually am. There's no act, no mask, no performance, and the people who love me now, they love the real thing. That's worth more than 1,000 superficial friendships. Here's a truth that might sting. Most people are so worried about their own lives that they're barely thinking about yours. You're afraid of what people will think, but people aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. They're worried about their own lives, their own failures, their own insecurities. That judgment you're so afraid of, it barely exists. And when it does exist, it lasts about 5 seconds before that person goes back to worrying about themselves. You're sacrificing your authenticity for an audience that isn't even watching. I wasted decades performing for ghosts, for imaginary critics, for people who were too busy performing their own lives to notice mine. What a waste. What an absolute tragic waste. If you're young, and to me, anyone under 60 is young, please hear this. You do not have to become who others want you to become. You do not have to want what others want you to want. You do not have to live the life that looks good to others. You are allowed to want different things, strange things, things that make no sense to anyone else. You are allowed to fail in pursuit of something you actually care about. That failure is worth more than success in something meaningless. You are allowed to change your mind, to change your path, to change everything about how you're living. It's your life, not theirs. And I'm 73 years old. I've probably got a decade left if I'm fortunate, maybe less. And I can tell you this with absolute certainty. My only regret is that I didn't start being myself sooner. I don't regret the failures. I don't regret the strange choices. I don't regret the people who walked away when I stopped performing. I regret the years I wasted pretending, the decades I spent living someone else's idea of a life. Don't make my mistake. Stop performing. Stop seeking approval. Stop outsourcing your identity to people who will never have to live with the consequences. Figure out who you actually are, what you actually want, what actually makes you come alive, and then do that, regardless of what anyone thinks. The people who laugh at you for being yourself, they're still trapped in their own performances. They mock what they secretly want but are too afraid to pursue. The people who abandon you for being authentic, they were never yours to begin with. But the people who love you for who you actually are, those people are gold. Those relationships are real. That life is worth living. I found that life at 52. Late, yes, but not too late. You can find it now, today, right now. Stop asking, what will people think? Start asking, what do I actually want? Stop performing, start living, because I promise you this, you do not want to be 73, sitting where I'm sitting, realizing you spent your whole life being someone you never actually were. That's a pain I wouldn't wish on anyone. Be yourself, the real one, the weird one, the one you've been hiding. That's the only person worth being. If this video reached you, share it. Leave a comment telling me what mask you're ready to take off. Subscribe. I've got more truths to share before my time runs out. Your authentic life is waiting. Stop performing. Start living. Now. Not someday. Now.